Hello, and welcome to the show. Today, we're talking about Wolfenstein Youngblood. Now, this game is known by many for the wrong reasons, and you'll often see a lot of hate and frustration geared towards it from fans and general audiences alike. So, let's see how it turns out in 2024. Here's a little bit of a background. I got the 100% on this game in 2019, so you're probably wondering why I'd go through it again. Well, first of all, the last 10 years of Wolfenstein games have been great. So I've been recompleting each on PC and Steam, and I highly recommend that you play most of them since they're all cheap and on Xbox Game Pass. Secondly, I feel as if completing this game twice gives me a pretty informed opinion to help you know if it's worth your time. Anyway, here we go. Wolfenstein Youngblood has 60 achievements or trophies and mainly plays as a co op adventure, whether you're playing solo or online. The game only requires you to play with somebody else for a single achievement, which isn't too bad for just one mission. And our story follows the Blazkowicz sisters, who are the daughters of BJ, the series protagonist. They're scrappy, inexperienced twins with determination only seen in a family like theirs, and their father's gone missing. It's up to the twins to go and find him with the power of teamwork and their advanced cloaking suits. Honestly, that's really it. Unlike the previous games, Youngblood wastes no time with long story cutscenes or a deeper theme where a world with the Fourth Reich has been run out of the United States. Now, you'll be playing in occupied France, where the Nazis have managed to keep their numbers. And let me tell you, you'll be fighting more enemies in this game than any other title in the entire series. Luckily, you have a pretty solid arsenal. We're working with 8 standard and 5 heavy weapons, so there's good variety that encourages you to play with what type you have. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. Each weapon does have a certain type of damage that works most effectively on certain enemies, and each foe has a health bar above their head signifying the weapon type that you should use. That's a bit of a frustrating curve in the early game because each fight can be really tough, even on normal. Even regular enemies can feel like tanks until you get to level 20, and it slows down the constant flow of combat. You'll get good at it, but in the beginning, it can be tough. Speaking of combat, you have two options: stealth or guns blazing. Now, I don't know what the developers were thinking here, because Youngblood was just not built for stealth. Enemies are on high alert the whole time, and it's so easy to get spotted without dumping a ton of upgrades into your cloak first. But by the time you're able to afford all of that, you don't even want to be playing stealthy anyway. Just poorly implemented overall. That's a surprise because the other games have way more functional stealth mechanics without a cloaking suit. Now let's address a big reason why this game is so hated: the twins that we're playing as and the co op functionality. The sisters are very much a team and are locked into the fight together. You definitely feel like you have a partner on your side. They're both young, scrappy, and taking on a crazy adventure, which reflects on their personalities and does work well enough. But what's frustrating is the awful dialogue and the constant one liners and annoying elevator cutscenes. Things like this work when they're used sparingly, and you'll have had more than enough by the time you finish the story. I'm sure you can imagine how that feels when you're taking triple the time to get all the achievements. The characters are fine, but I had to play with the sound off for a good chunk of my experience. The writers somehow created the experience of having a sibling while suggesting they had no brothers or sisters of their own. It's just a bit too much, but it won't ruin your experience. Additionally, the frustration of working with your sibling is very present in solo play. When the game launched 5 years ago, it was way worse. Always breaking stealth, having to revive your partner, and just a whole load of headache inducing AI behavior. In 2024, it's definitely improved, but it still serves as more of a nuisance than a real benefit. Sometimes your sister will go into a down state really quickly, and you'll need to beat the timer so that you don't lose a shared life. There were times where I'd go down and my partner wouldn't even come up and revive me, but that was rare. Separately, you have to call upon the AI to help you open doors, gates, switches, and shared life crates, which occasionally cause your partner to move at an agonizingly slow pace. It isn't game breaking, but I can see where the criticism lies. One positive is the PEP system mechanic. You'll throw up a hand signal to get a gameplay boost when it recharges, and that's pretty quick. You can even customize your PEP signals to fit your playstyle better. I really enjoyed that aspect of it, and it's definitely a standout, especially when playing with an AI partner. The worst part about your partner is that they're not strong enough to be a competent fighter when you need it most, but they'll definitely steal some important kills when you're leveling up each weapon. More on that later. If you're downed and the AI kills an enemy, kiss that experience goodbye. If the opposite happens, expect a heavily reduced XP gain. Overall, your partner feels like they're there when you need them the least. When you're playing solo, you'll forget that you have a sister until she's needed and slows the game down. That's a cardinal sin for a game based in cooperative play. And if you're playing with a real person, you'd better hope that Bethesda.net keeps your connection. Let's get into the meat of the gameplay. There are hundreds of collectibles, coins to collect, and weapons to upgrade. This is as good as you make it for yourself. That can be a wonderful thing or a nightmare, depending on who you are. You can dual wield, but it's far more limited this time around. And ammo is fairly plentiful, but you'll run out quickly if you need to rely on a certain weapon too much. And since you're fighting hordes of enemies, you'll need tons of upgrades. There's two upgrade systems: abilities and weapons. Your abilities grant you more power, tactical prowess, and increased visibility of collectibles on the map, and you'll also grab skill points by clearing objectives, mowing down enemies, and finding collectibles. They're very useful, but you'll have to get to level 92 to see them all, and yes, that is an achievement. Weapons are upgraded by mastery levels and paying for upgraded parts with coins. This is far and away the worst aspect of the game because it's a grind if you're playing for 10 hours or 45. Now, coins are mainly found in crates and randomly scattered around the environment, but the latter is a joke because you'll nab about 1 to 4 on average without the crates. The crates are scattered generously around the environment and will give you 50 to 100 coins a pop, but the problem is that they respawn every 24 hours, slowing down your earning potential greatly. Now, you can change the clock on your system in order to sort of get around this, but if anything, that's just an extra step that I didn't want to take. Now, since that does slow down your potential earning greatly, I gotta be honest too. The weapon upgrades are expensive and ridiculously varied. On some guns, you'll find well over 25 upgrades to buy, and they're worth at least 3 to 5 crates apiece. Guess what? Getting all the weapon upgrades for the 13 in your arsenal is an achievement too. This will probably be the last thing you do if you go for the 100%, and it's an agonizing grind. To make matters worse, there's also an achievement where you have to get each weapon to mastery level 10. Each mastery level requires a set of kills, and the count is high. You'll want to pay close attention to this as you play through because it will save you time later. Each mastery level provides a small permanent damage increase, which is nice, but it can be really awkward when you're farming an area with a gun that just wasn't made for all the enemies you're facing. I'll say this: the two best weapons in the game are the machine pistol and the laser craftwork. Pistols melt fleshy enemies, and the laser craftwork will demolish anything robotic. Don't forget your melee too, because it's actually stupidly powerful. So, with that out of the way, how does the game actually play? Very well, honestly. For the most part, the game runs very smoothly with a few graphical hitches and only one crash for me. The Wolfenstein series pioneered the modern first person shooter, and the gunplay is mostly rock solid here. It's fast, frenetic, and a ton of fun to use everything in your arsenal to conquer hordes of evil. The traversal works pretty well, and there's a lot to explore on each map that you find yourself in. Plus, I've always been a huge fan of that double jump feature. The environments are nicely detailed, and the game looks great almost everywhere, really locking in on the feel of the retro futuristic 80s time period. You can even find collectibles that cover popular songs from the decade. It's super fun. If you've played and enjoyed the other Wolfenstein games, you'll find that this one continues the strong gun combat while being less bogged down by long story cutscenes. Youngblood isn't a game that takes itself seriously, and I appreciate that. It's almost like the game doesn't have any real connection to the storyline. But even when it does present breadcrumbs of what happened since the new Colossus, it's a fun, self contained story that works without going overboard. That's a legitimate improvement over the other games, and you don't have to be totally invested to enjoy it. Definitely the most pick up and play of the series so far. Also, fair warning. One annoying mechanic is that when you lose all your shared lives with your partner, your progress will be reset all the way back to the beginning of the mission that you're on. This happened to me once, and that was enough. Lastly, let's take a brief look at the maps you'll be playing on. Basically, there are three sets of levels: the streets, the underground, and brother gated areas. The streets are a standard level type with mostly linear movement, but that said, this game does feature a bit of exploration, and some of the collectibles you'll be hunting are in tight spaces or areas off the beaten path. The exploration keeps the game from just being a point A to point B journey, but I have to say that this wasn't a strength for me. Oftentimes, you'll have to reach an objective that isn't too obvious in its location, and it gives a relatively small game the feeling of walking into a little labyrinth. It got really annoying sometimes, and the feeling that I had like I was solving a puzzle in some places. This is presented horrendously in the underground sewer areas because finding the sewers is one thing, but navigating them is another. It's an exercise in frustration, low visibility, and poor game design. To be fair to Youngblood, this is pretty much the case in any game with the same level type, but I found myself rolling my eyes when I had to go into the sewers. Sometimes the missions task you going in and out multiple times. It's a real headache. The third level types are Brother Gates. Basically, these are raid areas that progress the main story the most. You'll find a boss at the end of each Brother Gated area, and they can be quite a challenge, so be prepared for a ton of robots and an excessive amount of bullets and lasers. A lot of people will actually enjoy the level design more than I did, but if you're like me, it can occasionally be a chore. You'll travel through a metro system, and it can be a bit difficult figuring out where to go for your mission before truly grasping where everything is on the map. If you ever go too far at the end of a mission and want to get back to the starting area, just quit and restart. It'll save you some time. So now that we're at the end, I gotta say, Wolfenstein Youngblood isn't nearly as bad of a game as many people say. It's had its fair share of problems in 2019 and also in 2024, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot to enjoy here. Sometimes I feel as if people bash a game because they hear negative press only, and the game's legacy is completely doomed from there on out. If you're curious about it, play it for the combat and general craziness of the atmosphere. If you're a Wolfenstein fan, this is still familiar enough to enjoy without having to follow a big story. Most of the problems here are mostly up to personal preference, and the ones that you can't control won't break the game. That said, if you're an achievement hunter, steer clear unless you're willing to grind upgrades, masteries, and coins for triple the amount of time that it takes to complete the story. Overall, Wolfenstein Youngblood is a fun but forgettable game to just play casually. It's only a nightmare if you're trying to see everything, and it's definitely the weakest of an incredibly strong franchise reboot, but I can say that it's worth playing on Game Pass or on the cheap. If there's one thing I can leave you with, form your opinion on a game after giving it an honest shot. My goal is to help you understand whether it appeals to you or not, however you play games. Youngblood is a game that is remembered for its faults, but none of its strengths. But if you haven't played it, you might miss out on something you enjoy if you just read the negative press. It's really not the train wreck people are making it out to be, in my opinion at least, and if you want a little shakeup and a fun combat system, Youngblood is worth playing. So, what do you think of the game? Maybe you have some questions for me. I'd love to enjoy and have a little discussion with you in the comments. And really, thank you for taking the time to watch this far. I'll see you at the next 100%.